Good afternoon or good evening. My name is Cata Balsano and I want to welcome you to Conciencia Talks. It is season 2 and we're very, very happy to bring you more conversations on how Black and Brown communities are impacted and how we can do better in order to raise awareness and have these discussions openly. Conciencia Collective, in collaboration with Me Too, is bringing you these talks every other week, so please stay tuned for the future ones. And to learn a little bit more about Conciencia Collective, it was born this year, pardon me, in June of this year after a series of really unfortunate events, including George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, and Breonna Taylor. We just want to be here to raise discussions and have conversations on things that are extremely important. And today we are discussing immigration, an issue that impacts many communities. And I just want to read a little bit more of how big of an issue this is within the United States. So Pew Research in August 2020 posted an article that stated that the United States accounts for more migrants than any other country in the world. More than 40 million people living in the US were born in another country, accounting for a fifth of the world's immigrants. Many families see the United States as a new opportunity, escaping the horrors of what they had been living, especially when they have little ones and families to look after and raise. However, the experience for an immigrant is many times a complicated one, filled with obstacles and judgment regarding where they came from, and in many circumstances, what they fled from. These stories mold the experiences of immigrants in our country, and I'm so pleased to sit with you today, along with a panel of amazing people to discuss immigration, and more specifically, when it pertains to our Black and Brown brothers and sisters. Now, we're bringing you today 2 amazing artists, a band, and another artist. So I want to introduce you to La Doña.
Hi, Cata. Thank you for having me.
How are you? Thank you so much. I want to discuss a little bit about your activism in regards to immigration, how outspoken and vocal you are, and also your quote. You know, you said a very impactful quote where you stated many things regarding these communities. So I'd love to learn a little bit more about where this comes from.
Yeah, I think that, there's a lot of different things in the quote that I could touch on. But overarchingly, as it pertains to immigration, is basically we're all vulnerable under the system of capitalism, and obviously an increasingly fascist state of capitalism. So it's the Black and Brown people that are facing the most of the violence at the hands of the police state and at the hands of a world of violent borders. So yeah, as a person who stands against all borders, who is anti-border, I think that these are similar struggles that we face. All different types of communities, especially those who are forced to cross borders, and those that are forced to exist in a country that basically sees them as something to exterminate. So in the quote, I really also wanted to remind us all. Well, in this insurgence of revolution and in this revolt, which is so beautiful and so important and so in this country, there was a lot of. I think that there was like a really interesting and dangerous kind of upsurgence of like, well, what happened when kids were in cages, and what happened when about these different issues that were affecting Latinx or other brown communities. And I felt like my statement was kind of to posit myself as a Chicana, as a brown woman, completely in solidarity with my Black friends and brothers and sisters and non-gender conforming people, and to also maintain their narrative of revolution and anti-police violence at the center of the struggle. So I think that That being said, there is a lot of intersectionality in all of these movements and all of these struggles, which target at the core white supremacy and capitalism.
Lovely. Thank you. And I also, Skylar and I want to introduce also La Santa Cecilia, a lovely band and a group of people that not only are outspoken about their activism and what they believe. Hello, also. Hello. But also, in your lyrics, you guys many times speak of many things, and I've read quotes where you want to bring the immigrant experience to life and make these people visible, because many times the immigrant is extremely invisible and isn't taken into account in the U.S. So I'd love to hear more about not just your quote that you shared with us, but your activism within your art and just as individuals.
Well, the quote specifically, I think it was something that we wanted to use to express our solidarity with everything that's happening right now, and especially with our brothers and sisters in the African American community.
Yeah.
And we wanted to really show this quote also came after kind of that blackout. I think it was Blackout Tuesday. I don't remember exactly what day it was, but where the music industry was supposed to put a black square on their Instagram and social media. To express kind of like their solidarity with everything going on. But we also kind of wanted to make sure that people in the Latin music industry also kind of came forward and said, look, like I also benefit from a system of white privilege, no matter what part of Latin America I may find myself in, and especially here in the States as well. And we wanted to see like people of lighter complexion, of white complexion within Latin America come out and really use their platform to express that, which we didn't see a lot of it, but that was the main purpose of that quote, to kind of let people know that our experience as brown people, as Afro-Indigenas, as Indigenas, as Afro-Latinos is very complicated and political, and being artists that are within those categories, it's very complicated sometimes. So we kind of wanted to make sure that we express that as much as possible through that quote. Oh man, I can't hear you.
I can't hear you.
We can't hear you.
Hear me?
There you go.
Yeah.
Okay, there.
Yes, no, I was just saying that was such a good description. And finally, I just want to introduce our expert who's going to accompany us and support us on many things that, I think we all have questions, and this is just such a good roundtable discussion. So I want to introduce Lucia Alain. Lucia, how are you?
I'm good. Excited to join all of y'all.
Okay, so just a little background on Lucia. She's an immigrant rights organizer and activist. She's worked for over 10 years in immigrant rights advocacy. Last year, she was named Woman of the Year by Glamour magazine. And she shared with me that she was formerly an undocumented immigrant, actually for 16 years. So very excited to learn about your experience and how you work so hard now to make this community visible.
Yeah, I feel so weird that I didn't get to share a quote. And I think one of the biggest quotes that I do share with everyone whenever I go anywhere and I want to read it out loud was, I live by Maya Angelou. One of the biggest things that I literally, every time I speak anywhere and I want to read it out loud, is my mission in life is not merely to survive, but to thrive, and to do so with some passion, some compassion, some humor, and some style. And I feel like one of the biggest things that being in this call, and I think like, I don't want to be biased, but La Santa Cecilia is one of my favorite bands, and I know them personally. So I think like this quote really sums up not just the fact that I am in, I love the work that I do, but also the fact that like I think a lot of people take in what I do so serious, and how this quote, captions is that I, not only do I survive on the work that I do, but I also thrive. I thrive on the fact that I used to be undocumented. I live in a mixed status family, but I also add some humor and some style. And I think it's such a perfect way to walk into this, because I think one of the ways that I add humor and style is literally with the guest that we have on today. I think like La Santa Cecilia really does bring in that humor and style to it. I mean, like, we just think about the music that La Santa Cecilia brings to us, and I think a lot of us who are in this, you know, in literally in this movement, like really identify with a lot of the music that La Santa Cecilia brings to us. And I think when we talk about styles, a lot, you know, I think if there's one song, because I could literally say it, if there's one song that I put on repeat and I'm always like, I'm going to listen to this because it reminds me of me being in the movement, but also figuring out my life as an undocumented, is La Moneda, which is like, every time I hear Marisol, there is a lyrics in a song that whenever I hear Marisol talking about how, you know, not money doesn't define who I am. And so there literally, and I can't remember the name of the lyrics specifically on this song, but like, I think one of the biggest things that brings up out of this is how I live my life, and I go day to day about how folks in the border or outside the border have to live through this. So I'm very inspired and also just honored to be on this call.
Amazing. And I think what you said, which I think we can all just chime in at this point and discuss, is the fact that, you know, moving to another country, whether by choice or by force, because some, you know, need to leave, it's like a life or death situation in many cases, brings a lot of experiences that many other, maybe unless you've lived it, you don't really understand it. And that's kind of what I want to discuss beforehand, you know, recognizing those challenges that these immigrants or the immigrants live, and also the family trauma that arises from these changes, particularly for our Black brothers and sisters, our brown brothers and sisters, who maybe not only have to deal with adapting to a new place, a new language, a new culture, but also, you know, the stereotyping, the microaggressions. So it's learning so many things, but also having to deal with so much trauma and consuming these things. So I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, I mean, and honestly, like, I was trying to look for it and I finally found it. So I think, like, and I don't want to quote La Santa Cecilia, but I will, being that y'all are on. I think there's one specific song, and I'm trying to like figure out how I'm going to translate this in English. But there's a specific lyrics in La Monedita that says, "Ni millones ni pantalones de piel que cuesten más que la quincena, eso trae problemas." And I think that specific line brings a lot of what many of us go through. So I think, like, many folks that migrate to the United States, a lot of us, I think that specific line, I think in my sense, is always like, I lived off Salvation Army clothes. So I literally had to live off things that didn't really cost a lot, but I had some sort of happiness within my own community of understanding that I didn't have to look at the harsh of what we were going through. And I think that was one of the biggest, and I don't like to say wall, but one of the biggest like struggles, right? Thinking about like coming to the United States and didn't have to think about what brand I was wearing, but really living my life as my mother was working, you know, her butt off on trying to feed us. And so I think that literally that line captures a lot of what I lived through here in the United States.
Great. And then Marisol, where are you?
Marisol, te están hablando.
Marisol, ¿dónde estás?
She's here. Hold on.
Connected?
She lost her connection.
Well, Marisol comes back. I do want to hear from La Santa Cecilia a little bit about these lyrics, and when you guys get together, do you compose them together, or does one of you just think of, okay, this is I've put this together after I woke up? Like, how does the inspiration to create the music come from? Is it from these experiences?
I think totally. It's our life. It's what we go through. It's how we grow up. It's how we grew up.
from my experiences, my parents are from Nicaragua, and I came here when I was really small. I was born in Venezuela, but I grew up in LA, and I didn't really understand. I just assimilated to the culture of LA, of being in the States, and not until I was a teenager did I experience something that like changed me and made me realize I'm not from here. And it was when like La Migra at that time, that was called, came
Right.
to my house looking for my uncle and flashing lights and asking for papers. And then, that was like a rude awakening for me that made me realize, man, what's this about having papers? Like, I don't belong here. It made me question who I was and where I was from. And I think these kinds of experiences that we all have in the band, like, really shape the message in the songs and the lyrics and the vibe and, the style of music that we choose. I mean, we're just a bicultural fusion of all these different things, and that's what makes us Santa Cecilia just a crazy ride, but also an inspirational ride because we're able to connect with so many people that have the same kind of experience that we do.
Mm-hmm. What can we do to bring more awareness in regards to these challenges, and how as a community support the immigrant community, especially those that are still coming in just now and that maybe live in fear or don't really know how to maneuver within such a heavy political climate that we're in, social climate that we're in currently?
There's so many, I would like to touch on that. There's so many groups. I'm from San Francisco, and I see right now so many coalitions and different organizations forming out of the necessity of providing direct services. Obviously, there's a lot of policy work being done, a lot of reform work, which is an important step to the abolition of borders and the abolition of ICE. But definitely a couple of organizations in my head or in the mission in San Francisco that I would love to shout out are Calma Oficial on Instagram. But they were previously a chapter of Border Angels and do a lot of work now and just providing direct services, getting food and water to our undocumented families, getting equipment, protective gear, and different work equipment to our day laborers. Working also with organizations like Visibility, also out of San Francisco, that does a lot of fundraising and just a lot of amazing cultural work for trans immigrants, undocumented immigrants. And there's so much that needs to happen to reduce the harm of the violence of this like border state. But those are among a bunch of really cool coalitions and organizations I know coming out of my community that I feel in so much appreciation for.
Okay, lovely. And then Marisol, I'd love to learn a little bit more, for example, as your experience also, not just like as a Latina and a brown woman, but also raising kids, being a mom and within the community. So how does that impact you?
I mean, first of all, I want to say, hola, quiero saludar a Lucía, y quiero saludar a la doña. I'm bummed I didn't get to hear La Doña when we first started the conversation, and a Lucía pues la quiero muchísimo, es una guerrera y que admiro mucho también. Entonces, pero I mean, like your question of what it's like raising a daughter now in this time, or like,
yes.
I mean, man, it's been a big change, to become a mother and to play music and to keep, like chasing your dreams and mothering a child está cabrón, está bien cabrón, pero siento que mi hija is like my reason, like I want to arm her, I want to educate her, I want her to feel confidence, and I want her to know empathy and to feel that she belongs to something, that she belongs to Los Angeles, that she belongs to her community. I try to like just empower her and share as much as I can with her. Aunque es difícil right now, because it's like we're going through this pandemic and it's like she's my anchor, in the sense that she keeps me going. because she's a kid. She's 4 years old. She doesn't know what's going on. She just knows that she's home, you know, and it's hard to like see all the things happening, you know, because you're watching from your phone nowadays, right? You're getting all your information from your phone, and to not let that like all this hate, all these horrible things happening in the world, toda esta injusticia a los inmigrantes, a los niños que están you know, like that aren't free. Entonces it's hard, but I feel that I like even more I want to fight, you know, I want to be there. I want to use my voice. I want to use my art to try to inspire her, to inspire others to change, you know, and it's like we write about it in La Santa Cecilia, we write songs about it, salgo a marchar, a cantar, you know, like I do everything I can, you know. And I guess, no sé, ojalá que she's like watching and that she picks up on this, you know, but I definitely try not to burden her with a lot of these worries, because sometimes, man, I'm sure all of you feel it, right? Like all these negative, all these bad things, and then you're just like, sometimes you feel like, what's the point, you know? But we have to keep on going. And I think something that I learned about this, creo que una enseñanza que aprendí de la pandemia de esto es de que obviously we're more connected than we thought, you know what I mean? Like alguien se enfermó en China, en París, en Grecia, en Japón, aquí todos estamos expuestos a enfermarnos y todos tenemos que cuidarnos, and we had to quarantine, and I feel like I hope that we realize that we're so connected to each other, you know what I mean? And what affects someone, you know, like across the world, man, across the, you know, like it can affect you too, obviously. And so I feel like, if anything, that we should learn that what happens to our undocumented brothers and sisters, to all the people that are out there, you know, just trying to live, to survive, you know, is that we're connected, you know. Y si mi hermano o mi primo no está bien, entonces yo no estoy bien, ¿no? Entonces, creo que eso es como una lección que aprendí de esto, y que siento que we should all, I hope that we realize this, that we're all connected, man, and what affects one affects the other, and we're responsible. We have to be responsible of keeping distance, of taking care of ourselves, so that we can one day meet each other again. Well, we have to take care of ourselves too, in that sense, you know, and take care of who, like, people shouldn't be, you know, like, not free, you know, because they're trying to, you know, like, entonces, no
Seek
sé,
a better life.
I completely agree, Marisol, and I think that goes to a larger, just like I'm a teacher, so I'm obviously now online with them, but I'm used to be with my kids every day, all day. And it speaks to a larger question of just like, what do detention centers exist for in the first place? What are we criminalizing people for? How are we telling people that their existence is reason enough to get killed or to get locked up or to be prosecuted by the police? Like, how is this serving us? How is this functioning as just police violence, as state violence, as a free exploitable workforce? So these are really hard questions, but I do also try and bring them up with my kids. Like, I'm not like, oh my God, doom and gloom, this is all messed up, it's nothing's gonna happen, like, oh my God. But I do say, like, no, you know, we have a problem, we work it out between the two of us. We're working towards transformative justice, teaching those lessons to form a path for them to understand that incarceration, detention, that is not anything that we need for any of our people, and how to move away from those things. While at the same time sharing music, sharing love, reminding us all that we have these connections, that they are more withstanding than obviously a pandemic, which is a big one. But how do we strengthen these connections, and how do we continue to produce joy while under so much pressure?
And Pepe, I have a question as well, which has a lot to do with what La Doña and La Marisol said, which is, you know, we are all connected, and it's I would say easier than ever to get together and form a group and show support. What are some ways that you feel that the community is lacking, in a sense of what would you like to see more when it comes to support to the immigrant community?
Yeah, there's a lot that we can all do, right? Being undocumented for 27 years in the U.S., y habiendo haber cruzado la frontera y vivir con todo esto de las redadas y no haber tenido papeles, going through DACA and now finally being documented, I see that there was this gap in between what I knew that was going on in the States. Whether, how am I going to apply to college? Can I get into college not having papers? ¿Qué es cómo voy a ayudar a mis papás? ¿Dónde voy a conseguir trabajo? Entonces, there's a lot of people out there still that are undocumented and you know, share your wisdom, share your, how were you able to do it? Yo me acuerdo que hay un profesor que llegué a Salamanca College y me dijo, ¿sabes qué? Yo sé que no tienes papeles, pero así le vas a hacer para entrar a la escuela y así vas a terminar tus estudios. Entonces, I think one of the things that I would want from our community is to share your knowledge, you know, it's to share what can get you onto the next level and what can get you onto the next step. And I think that was really helpful for me, finding so many people that were willing to help out. And I think that's what we need to do right now. Whatever knowledge you have, is whether you're undocumented or you're documented, let's share with the rest of our community, para que así nos fortalezcamos más. Y yo pienso que mucho, algo que es muy importante es mantener una familia muy sólida, la raíz de donde uno viene, no hay que perderlos en esos momentos. Yo soy de Oaxaca y orgullosamente soy de Oaxaca y nuestras tradiciones viven aquí en Estados Unidos. Entonces, en este momento que vemos que nos están separando a gente, nos están separando de ideas, we're so divided, I think we have to share our knowledge, share our wisdom, share everything that we have, that we carry, that we brought from wherever we came from.
And also, speaking of DACA, there's just, you know, continuously just so much uncertainty, and just currently as well, the administration kind of, you know, has everyone in this limbo of, yes, you know, yes, it's going to be done, it's going to be approved, or no, or just holding it off. Lucia, I'd love to hear from you a little bit more on, you know, what this process is, where it stands.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. I will say, I think one of the biggest questions that we talk about is figuring out whether this is just DACA fight. And I think, you know, there's definitely more than just DACA. Trump did threaten about this decision. And there has been a lot of people who ask me all the time, like, what can I do? And one of the biggest things, and I want to highlight that it's not the only thing, is you can go out and vote. I will tell you that, you know, one of the biggest things is go out and vote. If you are able to be a registered citizen, go out and vote and make sure that you get that winning ticket. One of the biggest things that I tell people from voting is we know that there has been a lot of movements, and we know that different people feel different about the elections. And I don't want to come on here and have to preach about who you should vote for. But many of us have been on different platforms about who we supported. And at this point, I was undocumented for about 16 years, and this is actually my first year's voting. So it's the first year that I get to exercise this right here in the United States after being undocumented for so long. And so I will tell you that vote for the winning ticket. I know that many of us have a struggle to think that there has been so much on our plate and have to think like, I don't want to vote for this person because this person doesn't have a background on what we believe on. But at this moment in this era where we're living, is vote for the winning ticket that's going to lead us into being able to win on a ticket that we're going to be able to push for legislation later on. Let's just get this position. So I tell everyone, if you're a Latino voter or Latinx voter that is able to vote, go out and vote, and know that voting isn't the only thing. Because I think a lot of the times when we talk about DACA or we're talking about immigration, people are like, is it, being that I'm not I'm not eligible to vote. Is that the only thing I can do? Absolutely not. I've been in this movement for about 15 years. So organizing, voting, and I've mentioned this before, but I work for Raíces, and Raíces is one of the main platforms that has been working around a voter engagement plan. So as you know, literally, please come out, register to vote. Literally, it's in many platforms, but voting is one of the biggest steps. So I don't know, like I feel like every time I talk about this, I'm like, vote if you're able to, and if you're not, organize. Those are the two main keys that I want to talk about.
Yes. La Doña, when it comes to, you said you speak to little ones, you're a teacher. When it comes to having these conversations in the classroom, how do you maneuver? How do you speak to students about such a big crisis for so many kids within the country?
I don't know. I think that this is always a question, when to start talking to your kids about what. I'm not a mother. I can speak as an educator, but I think that it's never too early. I think that students and children understand a lot more and are receptive to a lot more than you might think, right? So even if you're not like, yo, there's kids your same age in cages right now, we have to organize, we have to protest, we got to be on the streets. Even if you're not using that kind of language, they're still going to tell that you're tense. They're still going to tell that something's wrong, that their families are upset.
Right.
So yeah, it's just, I think it's a really special age. Speaking to young people, because they're still very human, right? They still are able to have a lot of compassion, a lot of empathy, and to view things on a very humanistic level and an individual level. So I think that definitely I start on the individual basis. Like, I teach mariachi, so we're in the class and I'm like, okay, this is so awesome. We're singing mariachi, comes from all of these different regions in Mexico. Like, raise your hand if you're from over there. Oh, raise your hand if you're from over there. Okay, cool. What about Thailand? Where's my Cambodian students at? What songs do you sing over there? So I think it's just about forming this mutual appreciation and respect that goes a long way when you're starting to talk about issues that are affecting different communities of color, especially. But yeah, it's a lifelong learning experience and question how to talk to your kids about it.
And I really love that you say that, because I think that there is a lot of just these same communities and people being villainized and kind of like the stereotypes, just they're continuously hit with stereotypical things from people who have said certain things maliciously about these communities. So how do you kind of like tackle that, for example?
Yeah, I deal with that a lot. Even the internalized racism, right? Or the internalized prejudice of a lot of my kids coming and saying, saying things about their own communities, or, using Orientalist voices or whatever, like it might be, all these little things where you're like, well, that is triggering me. That's not cool at all. But a kid, you're obviously not going to be like, you're wrong. What are you doing? So you're like, oh, okay, well, we don't use that kind of language. We don't talk about like that. And I will take the time to address it with the class, because I don't think that it's enough to shut down stereotypes when you see them. I think that teaches kids the same way that you're like, oh, that's a bad word. It teaches kids, okay, I'll get in trouble if I do that, but it doesn't really teach kids like why it's wrong. So I take the approach of taking the time, taking the space. If I lose the lesson, I'll be teaching them a different lesson. So you just really have to take the time and respect that as like a true thing that needs to be taught in school.
Okay, lovely. Another thing that I think is very important, it's a conversation that I've had continuously, is the whole misunderstanding on whether immigrants pay taxes, don't pay taxes, whether they contribute to society or not. And I think it's something we should definitely talk about. Lucia, if you want to, spearhead this one.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting conversation, because a lot of people always focus on the labor. And I think one of the biggest things that I talk about is, yes, immigrants pay taxes in all times. My mother, was an undocumented immigrant for about 15 years, and she paid taxes all her time that she was here undocumented. But one of the biggest things that I want to like kind of shift into is we shouldn't have to focus on the labor of an immigrant who comes here, because I think a lot of the times is we pay taxes, and I think the government and the media in general focuses, if you don't pay taxes, then you're not like allowed to be here, or you're not allowed to be part of the narrative. And I think one of the biggest struggles, and just in general, what I focus is on, I'm someone who, just, I didn't graduate from college, and I don't focus on two things. One is institutional education and taxes. People are always like, did you pay your taxes? And I'm like, yes, I did, but I don't have to focus on that. I think one of the biggest conversations that I have when I talk about this is colonialism is very real, and one of the main reasons why people migrate to the United States is because the United States decided to go into every other country and pretty much take up space. And so why, when we retract to why we pay taxes, is because the government makes us say kind of like, oh, you owe this. And absolutely we do. But think about like all of the things that are happening in the day of today. We talk about abolishment of ICE. We talk about abolishment of NYPD and just policemen in general, and I think like one of the biggest questions is, why do we pay taxes? And it's our tax money is going to these institutions that are not really helping us. Currently we are talking about the era where we're talking about George Floyd, we're talking about Breonna Taylor, we're talking about George Blake, and the concentration shouldn't be because my money is paying towards taxes, is because I should be under the pay of these folks paying. I think right now is not just to concentrate on the labor, but also the emotional, and also the reason why migrants, I will end it with this, is migrants don't migrate to the United States because we want to. We migrated here because colonism came into our countries and destroyed part of where we're living. So one of the main reasons why my mother decided to bring us here is because we had a horrible state where we were living, and we're living here because of that. So, I just want to leave with the idea is, yes, we pay taxes, but we shouldn't have to focus on our labor. Our labor shouldn't define us because we're here.
Absolutely.
And I like to ask, okay, what about the corporations that are crossing borders and not paying taxes?
Good point. Let me point. Another issue that really impacts our communities is colorism. I think that's something that we all know and we all recognize, and we all hear phrases and expressions and certain things, and it's kind of ingrained in us, literally ingrained in us. I'd like to hear more from the guys of La Santa Cecilia, also, who's been real quiet. Regarding
I'm typically not this quiet, but I'm just listening because it's
come
a
on,
learning,
man, we want to hear you.
it's just a learning experience for everybody. But in terms of colorism, I mean, again, to go back to the quote that we submitted is, I mean, we deal with, so like, Lucy's talking about colonialism. We were dealing with the system of white privilege for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, to where everybody is affected. Everybody who lives in the community is affected by colonialism and its products and its thoughts and its ideals and its governments and its systems. And we're dealing with it all the time. You know what I mean? Whether you get made fun of for being brown, whether you're marginalized for being Afro-Latino, African-American, whatever it is, we're dealing with this constantly. And it's such an intense thing that we're dealing with in terms of our phenotype, our color, what the construct of race does to every single person in this world. And for us, I mean, the most important thing that we've always tried to do is to create awareness of the music that we play and why we play it and where it comes from, the roots of who we are, of our music, of our culture, our Indígena, our Africana, our and yes, American in terms of how we're socialized in this modern time. But all those choices that we make as people and what we choose to bring awareness to are due to us wanting to empower ourselves through our root, through the beauty of our culture, the beauty of our skin, the beauty of where we come from. And hopefully that, like Pepe was talking about, sharing his traditions as being a indígena from Oaxaca. And for us, that's such an empowering, beautiful thing. and hopefully through those things that, you know, we can combat all these things that we're seeing, that we're experiencing, that que nos tienen así como súper congestionados de tanto odio, ignorancia y todo eso. But we want to make sure that, you know, again, that we utilize the platforms that we have and our voices to create this empowerment through the beauty and the truth of who we are and where we come from, not just only speaking on the impacts of colonialism and all this stuff, but really trying to empower all of us, and with all the beauty, like all the people on this screen are right now. And we're all very well aware of all the problems that we're facing, and like Lucy said, we just have to get to work, you know, every single day.
I'd like to add a little bit to that. That just like with this, con esto, cuando hablamos de esto de colorismo, like as a mom, I do feel like that I like yo crecí con muchos complejos, right? Like, you know, en tu propia familia son racistas y te tratan mal, and there I could see like the preference, you know, like my grandfather having preference for the younger, for the lighter skinned, you know, the lighter skinned nietos, y yo siendo la más prieta, pues era así como, no, name calling and things like that. So I find myself like feeding my daughter as much love and making sure that she's looking at things and watching and listening and things that like will make her feel proud for who she is, you know, for her beautiful curly hair, you know, like for her being Mexicoamericana, for her speaking Spanish, and to encourage all these things. Because when I was a kid, I'm sure my mom, y no es que no era su culpa, you know, she didn't know, she was no sabía, no, like we just know what you know, what we watch on TV, what we listen to and stuff. But in that sense, I feel like, no way, man, like, you know, this girl, you know, she needs to feel like empowered and beautiful, and I mean, you know, like we're cutting out magazines and we're cutting out like todas las morenas, you know, like frutas, cosas hermosas, you know, because I want her to feel proud, you know. I don't want her to feel like, oh, I have to, because so many years I lived with that. I thought, oh, I have these dreams of being a singer, but I don't look like the magazines my mom used to look at, you know, the Vanidades and all that bullshit, you know, like, and you grow up with that, and you're like, I could never be what I want to be because I'll never look like that. And that's like, obviously not. Thank God we're doing what we do. We play our music and stuff. Definitely people judge us, you know. It's like, you look at this band, La Santa Cecilia, you know, like tienes a un indígena de Oaxaca, tienes a una mujer morena, gorda, tienes like, no somos como que we don't fit the mold, pero we don't give a fuck, you know, either. Like, you know, like we're gonna play music, and we're gonna do and live and shine, and so I do definitely, like, man, I like always try to like feed that to my kid and make her feel like proud of being brown, proud of her roots, and yeah, que nadie me la desprecie, you know, por cómo se ve ni nada, you know.
Absolutely. I mean, in the comments, we have Michelle Hernandez saying it's ingrained in previous generations, thinking that white is better. And it's true. We all hear it. We all, you know, we all have stories of our grandparents who, you know, if they were dark skinned, they'd be ashamed of it, or etc. Just it's a continuous thing. And just now are we starting to see more and more recognition, even within, I'm Colombian, and even like within Latin America, I speak on behalf of Colombia. Just now in 2020, are you slightly starting to see a Black artist on a billboard or on, you know, in a magazine?
I think that that's something that like media, like TV, radio, print, like come on, guys, like, you know, like you guys need to like uplift brown voices, you know, like diversity, like it's all on them too, like all the Univision and the Telemundos and all that shit, man, and all these, like you need to like open your eyes, and like you can't, this cannot be like that. And you know, like, no sé, a mí me enoja mucho eso, porque me choca ir a México y ver, it's like you see all the commercials, and it's all European looking Latinos, and it's like, that's not how we look like, dude. Like, no nos vemos así, y eso no es todo lo bonito, you know. So I think that yeah, like what, you know, I love all, you know, also the you know, the comment with the, ay, cómo se le llama lo que dijo, no, que yo creo que it's like, yeah, like we need to hold them accountable porque ya estuvo bueno, you know, de esparcer tanto, to share so much fucking ignorance, you know, to share so much, like to create so much hate because you're a part of it, you know what I mean? And that's why I feel, you know, and it's not like I don't take myself seriously all the time. I like to have fun, but man, like I'm not gonna put out a song or music that's gonna talk pendejadas, you know, or that's gonna make someone be less, or you know, like no, that's not what I take responsibility in what I'm doing. I feel like, you know, in the art that I make.
Yeah.
And I feel that a lot of other medios, artistas y todo también, you know, it's like responsabilízate, cabrón, por favor, you know, por lo que estás diciendo, por lo que estás compartiendo y por todo eso, you know.
I think that's
Marisol, I feel you. Yeah.
Just because I work around. Okay, so I think one of the biggest things is I want to mention to this is on Monday it's gonna be a year since we had our El Paso Firme concert, and La Santa Cecilia was there. And I think one of the biggest things that I want to highlight out of this is I produced this concert on my own with the help of Endolon, which is an organization that works with labor workers. And I think one of the biggest things when we were strategizing this is exactly what Marisol was saying, is when we think about artists that we included, I think one of the biggest things that I can highlight about this El Paso Firme concert was that we literally had brown women leading this concert. We had Marisol singing, we had Ana Tijoux, we literally had a Guatemalan singer who in my brain, I know Marisol knows the name, and I'm like right now thinking of it, and I have so many artists in my brain, and I forgot
Rebecca something.
Rebecca Lane. Yes.
Rebecca Lane.
Yes, thank you, Rebecca Lane. And so like to have to produce a concert for myself and have to like literally be on, because we weren't just in El Paso, we were on the border, and we were trying to like provide a message. And one of the biggest things that I talk about is colorism, and colorism is huge because I myself aren't a skinny girl who can identify in Univision. I think a lot of people, when they talk about colorism, they're like, how can I identify with music? I love music. And I think, you know, I want to bring up, I know that we're like moving on time, but I want to be able to quote, and I know I'm quoting a lot of Santa Cecilia's lyrics, but I think like to me, right, there is like one of the biggest lines of, and I know that like La Marisol and just like in general La Santa Cecilia made this amazing video that the undocumented movement can really relate to, which is Yellow. You know, they made this song, which actually, you know, I know my boss is watching, and Erica was in this video. And one of the biggest, to me, one of the biggest lines in El Hielo was, El hielo anda suelto por las calles, nunca se sabe cuándo nos va a tocar. And I think that specific, and I want to say it in English, you know, the ice is always on the streets, and we don't know when it's going to touch us. And I think when we talk about colorism, that's a line that really identifies with us, because I think like if you're a brown person that looks like myself, or also, you know, or Alex or La Doña or any of us in this call, we might not get the same treatment from a police station than maybe what anybody else who was white Latin, who might be like, oh, you can pass on. So I just really want to clarify that I think apart from just having this conversation, is being able to provide these spaces where bands like La Santa Cecilia and La Doña really come in handy. And I haven't had the pleasure to work with La Doña, but literally having the pleasure to have worked with La Santa Cecilia, specifically like Marisol, and have worked with all other three other members, just understanding that colorism is huge, and not just talking about it, but really coming into front and really talking about what does privilege mean. I think within our own Latinx community, and having to understand that if you don't talk about it within ourselves, then there's really isn't like a upbringing. And I think the last thing I want to say about this is it's crazy because I have the definition of colorism literally up in my screen, because I always talk about this. And one of the biggest things about colorism is prejudice or discrimination against individuals with dark skin tone, typically among people of the same ethnic or racial group. And which means is if I stand in a car as a brown queer woman, I'm gonna get arrested whether I have papers or not. So just understanding that people like La Santa Cecilia with lyrics really care, which is why I'm not just a fan and friends with them, but I carry their lyrics because they literally represent what I live. And so understanding that this isn't only about me, isn't about representation, but also what I listen to, and like how do I carry on lyrics, and how important it is for musicians to carry on this message in a different platform that isn't just immigration and advocacy.
I think
Lucia,
go ahead.
I just want to add one thing really quickly. Like, I totally felt everything that both of y'all were saying. I completely agree. And I just want to also like echo that as musicians or as artists or people with more of a platform, like it's always your job to be responsible for what you're putting out, to be, pushing the envelope and be really more radical than you might be just with your friends or your family chilling. Like, you really have to be pushing that narrative forward. And another thing that we can do, all of us, is be more vocal in the way that we utilize and engage with Black art forms, right? All of us that are playing cumbia, all of us that are playing son jarocho, all of us that are playing salsa, it needs to be an explicit acknowledgement of the African roots of these types of music. Pop, rock music, everything that is being upheld is being whitened, is being co-opted and packaged for this large popular consumption is all based in Black art. So while we're combating colorism within our own communities and with our larger scopes, we also have to hold ourselves responsible and to keep promoting and keeping explicit about the fact that we're all engaging with Black art forms. So if we can love Black music, Black art, Black culture, then we need to love and support and protect our Black neighbors.
Definitely.
Yes.
And who are some Afro-Latino artists that you guys listen to, support, want to, give a little love to right now?
There's this, I like to always like share whatever, like on Instagram, I like to share like mujeres, and I really like this cantante, unas mujeres que se llaman ahorita Cantora y Jen, que son de Colombia.
Yeah.
Y es una percusionista, y a mí siempre me gusta compartir como videos or whatever they're doing, because I mean, la música de raíz es lo más bonito, and it's always like the base of what we what we're all playing with, como dice la doña, and also there's actually a dueto de cubanas que se llaman Las Crudas Cubensi, and they've been living in Austin, Texas for a while, and son unas chingonas, son unas hip hoperas, like raperas, y I mean, if in any way that I can like share, like, from my platform or what, music, pero I feel like, yeah, everybody, like, así como todos ahora nos queremos tomar selfies y ponerlos on Instagram y todo ese pedo, like, okay, todos nos creemos estrellas porque tenemos 5 followers, 100,000, millones, whatever pero it's your responsibility too, dude. You have a channel too, you have a voice, you have feet, you have legs,
Yeah.
like, it's not just about posting tampoco, like, tienes que ir así, like, you gotta walk the walk y hacerlo, and I say this to, like, I'm just trying to tell you, like, you, whoever's out there, like, you have the power, like, you have the power to influence and to change you, and it shouldn't just be like, oh, I'm just going to share this, sino de que realmente tienes el poder de cambiarlo, de hacer la conversación en tu casa, en tu comunidad, con tu vecino. I mean, like, we all are responsible, just like right now we all have to be responsible with our distance and all this. We all have to be responsible también, and it's not just about letting other people figure it out, it's like we got to get our hands in it, and I mean, yeah, I don't hope that we go back to some kind of normalcy. I hope that, like, something's got to change. The world, you can see it, it's like we have to change, and we can't be lazy fuckers just thinking that we can criticize on our phones and share and and double click, like, we're all responsible. Yeah, so like, Lucia, vayan a votar. Lucia dice vayan a votar, like, hablemos, right? Like, I mean, and like this, like what we're doing right now, having a conversation, like, how beautiful is that? I'm really I'm loving hearing you, la doña, Lucia, like mis compas también,
Actually,
me
want to know,
inspiran y me alimentan el alma, like, yeah,
La Doña, I also want to know any Afro-Latina artists that you got inspiration from when it comes to composing, putting out music, fusioning the rhythms and the genres.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of my influences, like, it's so funny that I'm in this genre right now. Like I play a lot of reggaeton, I do a lot of hip hop, because everything that I grew up playing and that I listened to even before I was like 20 was all from, you know, the 1800s or like early 20th century. So it's a lot of very, very old Afro Latin music, you know, a lot of salsa, a lot of bomba, plena, rumba, a lot of that stuff. But in terms of right now, I have definitely been listening to, I've seen in the comments somebody mentioned it, no sé cómo decirlo, pero Choc Quib Town, they're a hip hop group from Colombia. Yes, and there's so many, and especially like going to Cuba. I've been to Cuba a couple times, and they have a genre they call fusión, and they like to talk about you know, a fusion of hip hop, of black arts over here, and like jazz, and then also fuse with rumba. There's just so many really interesting cultural collaborations going on, and a lot of different types of groups that are coming out like that. So definitely, as what Marisol was saying, like you can go share a selfie, you can get attention in any way that you want, but also make sure that you're putting as much attention, as much energy, sharing darker artists, sharing Black artists, sharing Afro-Latina artists, sharing their work, sharing their art, and sending appreciation, sending visibility. That's just a small amount of the work that we can do.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to recognize.
I think it's really important to recognize right now that can you mute? So sorry. to you just asked us this question, this very important question. Can we name people in the Afro-Latin music realm? And to be honest with you, like Ladonia said, I'm talking about like all kinds of Afro-Cuban artists that I was inspired by, Afro-Brazilian artists that I was inspired by. But right now, if in our mind we're asked to name Latino artists, maybe 1 out of 10 is going to be Afro-Latino, even though they're the reason why all of us in these genres have a career and have an ability to be able to play this music.
Yeah.
And we can't really even name that many of them because it doesn't come to your head like a Balvin or that kind of thing where it's so in your face, it's so like in your ear all the time, and you don't know like we know these guys, Los Racas from the Bay, that they released this song, and I was like, man, why isn't a while ago? I was like, why isn't this song on the radio? And there's reasons why that song's not on the radio that we have to examine within the music industry, and that's fucked up because that's where the real issues are at. And I wish that we all had 10 people that we can name after were Afro-Latino, that were Afro-Indígena, that were Indígena artists from Latin America that we feel like we know about all the time, because all we're hearing about is like the whitewashed version of
that's
people,
gotta end.
That
That's gotta
sucks.
end.
That's gotta end. That's gotta end.
Yeah, it's like I wish we could just keep going with this, because it's like, yeah, we're thinking like, okay, ya qué artistas, ¿no? It's like puedo, al menos para mí, que puedo decir, okay, afrolatinas que son como una inspiración o han inspirado mi música o todo. It's like, bueno, afrolatinas, Celia Cruz, right? Olga Guillot,
Right.
Toña la Negra, they're like bolero singers, right? Eva Yon, like they're right. Pero imagínate, or that I can say that's close to me, like close as in years, right? Like, oh, Selena, like when I was, you know, she's like, but who else, you know? And yeah, the fact that we can't mention that many like huge artists, like we can't, you know, it's like, like what's wrong? Like I know we obviously, like, we know that it's out there, but like, you know, that's where it's like we should, you know, okay, also, why aren't their voices heard more, their music heard more and stuff, you know, like the ones that we're not talking about right now, you know?
And before we actually wrap up with the 2 most important topics of the night, we do have an audience question for La Santa Cecilia and La Doña. Since it seems like you all have a bit of experience, how can I get started in music if I'm undocumented in the United States?
Oh man, you know what? I think that's I would like to give my answer to Pepe, because when we started the band, Pepe was undocumented, and
Go Pepe.
and it was and I don't know, like I don't know how. I mean, he's our brother, pero tú lo viviste, you know?
Sí, lo vivimos y fue una experiencia donde we started traveling. We were getting called to go play in Texas, and ¿y cómo le voy a hacer? We had gigs, like we had to go through Arizona, and ¿cómo le vamos a hacer? Una de las cosas yo pienso que me motivó mucho a mí es pues estar rodeado de mis compañeros and they were always very supportive, whether you want to take the trip, dude, or we got to figure it out, right? So we took the trip, and we were all very conscious of what could have happened. Pero una de las cosas es de que, dude, we can't let, yes, as hard as it seems, as like, I know what it feels like not to be documented and trying to figure out your life professionally, whether you want to be a musician or whatever you want to be in this life, and having that, like, this paper kind of dictate where you're going to be, pero nunca se den por vencidos. Don't give up. Dude, one of the most important moments or one of the moments that I realized that it was so important for me not to give up was when I got a call from my mom, and she said, "Mijo, you guys won a Grammy. Estás ahí con los grandes." And not that this is important, but to her eyes, like, I had kept on going on with my dream, and I think wherever it takes you, wherever music takes you, it's a beautiful ride, and you shouldn't let like papers dictate what your how important or where you're gonna be at, what you're gonna do. So it's just keep at it with everything in this life. You just hay que darle hasta el final de nuestro camino. Hay que triunfar, hay que ver nuestros sueños realizados, and nothing, not even a piece of paper should tell you where you're going to end up in this life. You have to do it.
Definitely. I think as Latinos, we all kind of have a bit of a responsibility, even when it comes to our visibility. And I think the census is a really great way to, be seen in certain ways, to be taken accounted for. And a lot of Latinos or families, I understand, like, there's so many priorities. There's a pandemic right now. There's so many things on people's minds. Filling out a census maybe isn't the biggest priority, but it is important when it comes to us being taken into account for our needs, for what we do, where we live. And I did want to talk about the relevance of that. Lucia, if you want to start chiming in on why it's so important that they do fill it out, and that they give a little bit of their opinion internally at home to the government.
Yeah, so I think, within the Latinx folks, and before I want to answer the census, it's very important for everyone to be able to be part of the census and just understand that the more that we are part of this, the more that the funding is going to go to our communities. I think I want to make sure that I uplift the fact that I know that you were asking, Kata, about just like what artists, what Afro-Latinx artists. But I think apart from just artists, I think I really want to read out loud the 6 names of recent Black trans women who were, affected by all of this. And I want to read out their names because I think it's so important. Bryler Stone, Mercy Mack, Shaky Peters, Dryan McCarthy, and Tasania Halls, and Bree Black were all discovered to be victims between 17 and 32 of their death because they were Black and they were Black trans. And I think, being part of the census is one of these things, is being able to talk about how you are part of a community and being able to talk about these fundings and where these funders are going. But apart just talking about funding and money, is being able to talk about how important it is to continue to uplift these communities. Because I think, a lot of us are talking about like Black artists and how we fund ourselves from this. But I don't think throughout this conversation, we haven't talked and we haven't brought up the Black trans women. And I think I'm not so sure, and I don't want to assume where La Doña, where you're at, but I know for sure La Santa Cecilia is in Los Angeles. And not so long ago, there was 3 Black trans women who were attacked because they were literally living as Black trans women. And when I say Black trans women, I'm talking about these are women. We don't have to objectify on the fact that there was some surgery or anything else. We need to take care of the fact that they were trans women, and they were women who are living their day to day. And so, you know, as we're talking about the census, we're talking about women who are living their day to day lives and uplifting those voices as well. So just wanted to, you know, as we're talking about this, it's talking very important that we fill in the census and talk about how important it is to go out and fill this out, but not forget that there are trans women and specifically Black trans women that are being led to this. And I think, you know, as we're going through this, and I know we're out of time, but I want to make sure that I quote one of the biggest things from, you know, Victoria Santa Cruz, which is Afro-Peruvian women. And as her very famous poem says, hasta que un día que retrocedian iba a caer, which means, you know, just thinking about how recoiled and just how Black women in general have given us the path and where we're at today. And just recognizing that, you know, as we're having this conversation.
Yes. And I do want to hear from La Dueña what advice you have for the audience member that did ask, you know, as an undocumented immigrant, kind of how they can develop a career as an artist in the U.S. at this time.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, like, I can't speak to this as an immigrant. I don't have an immigration experience. But I would say something that has been, like, coming back to my mind over and over again throughout this talk is that we've been talking about how to enact change on a very large federal level. We've been talking about, I feel like the audience question kind of is asking about how to make it as a mainstream artist. And there's some things I can say about that, but I really do want to bring it home that you and your artistry and your activity, the way that you're active, you can make a really huge difference locally. So in addition to filling out the census, and then in addition to voting, which I encourage everybody to do, you definitely can be active on the streets. You can create, as Pepe was talking about, mutual information networks. You can create mutual aid networks. There's so many different things that you can do in your own hood, in your own city, in your own, you know, region, that will make you feel really fulfilled, that will bring you a lot of importance and safety and feelings of pride at where you're at. So I know there are limitations. I would also add that it's really all about the team. It's really all about the people that you collaborate with, and it's about the people that you surround yourself with. It can be a very you know, it can be a dangerous terrain out here in the broader music industry as we see it. But just be very intentional about the people that you collaborate with, the people that you bring on, because that will definitely serve you. But as it is, I fill out the census, vote, but also I want to see you in the street. I want to see you forming a line when they're evicting your neighbors. I want to see you forming a line when ICE shows up at your school. Like those are also that types of actions that we need to be taking.
Yes. And yeah, I think it's important for all of us to just impulse and encourage people to vote, but many people don't know their rights as voters. Many Latinos are afraid to go out and vote. And I would love for each person here to chime in not only on why there's importance in this, but also what rights the Latinos in every community have when it comes to voting and raising their voice on such an important race right now. Let's go with La Doña first.
I mean, I think this is so complicated, especially right now. There's hella voter suppression going on. You already know about that. But yeah, and it can also seem daunted to my undocumented folks, like, what the hell, I am paying hella taxes, I am doing all this shit, and what are the rights that I'm getting in return? What are the services that I'm being provided? But just in terms of, yeah, register, get out there, send your, if you're doing absentee, if you're sending your ballot in, send it in 2 weeks early. So you want to get that postmarked by, I think they're saying October 17th or something. And yeah, those are my words of advice.
My guys from La Santa Cecilia.
Yeah, I think it's just important. Again, same thing. Just to exercise your civic duty and to know that, you know, whatever it is that you're doing, you have to put good faith behind it and make sure that you're doing it for the reason of trying to empower yourself, empower your community, and give yourself some vote for hopefully someone who's gonna, like Lucy said, lead a way for us to continue to push them, because it's all about us in the end. Vote, but there's a lot of work behind the voting. So I think that's what I kind of hear everybody saying, and I think that's what we all feel, really.
And also, I don't think it should be.
I can't hear you, Marisol.
I said sometimes there's people there's like one or two people in the household, you know. I think it's important to get together with, you know, like we get together to talk about cheese, and we get together to talk about things like, let's get together and talk about who the fuck and what are we going to do, and like what are we voting for, you know. And definitely please voting, and to encourage, you know, like encourage our young people, like if you have little brothers, little sisters that are like of age to register and to vote, please tell them how important this is and how cool it is for them to use their voice, you know. If you have grandparents, if you have tios and tias that are, you know, they're citizens, they can vote. Like please encourage each other. Like let's, you know, this could be something that you're voting not just for yourself, you're voting for your community, for your family. So it shouldn't be something that you think it's only for that you have to deal with. It's like, no, like habla con tu familia, you know, like, and get out there and vote, man, because we need to change this shit really bad.
And Lucia, I want to hear a little bit about what does someone need to vote? I just want to, you know, I just think it's important that people understand that not only is their voice very valuable, but what exactly they need.
Yeah, for sure. So we have tons of petitions. I think one of the big that we do have a petition on Focus on Freedom All, which, you know, many of you have known about, is making sure that everyone, right? We talk about, you know, families being free, but we also can't forget about adults who are being detained in detention. So one of our biggest, I work for Raíces, and so one of our biggest programs is Text for Migrant Justice, and making sure that you go onto our website and check out. I think one of the biggest reminders is there are 32 million Latinx eligible folks to vote in this election. So, you know, being able to, with your help and you signing up to vote, we're prepared to make sure that there's a collective voice heard. So I think a lot of people, when they're like, can I vote? It's making sure that as we vote together, there's a collective, just like Conciencia Collective. It's just making sure there's a collective vote and there's a collective understanding that without voting, again, voting is just one of the major things. I think I want to highlight the fact that La Doña was talking about, we want to see you on the street. So if you are undocumented, we're not asking you to vote. We're asking you to maybe register folks to vote and come out and register folks to tell them, come out to vote, come out to hear your voices, because I understand that voter suppression is very real in 2020. We all know it. So it's not just about voting, but really organizing in your communities. So from my point is, if you want to check out our website and raicestexas.org 2020, you can look up in the latest updates, and we have a text for migrant justice, and we're talking about the migrant justice platform, which we've been able to show, and we've been able to talk about with other communities about the fact that I want to highlight, we have 32 million Latinx folks who are eligible to vote this year in this election. So just make sure to sign up for the text team, and you will get set up with whoever it is in our team to be able to register to vote.
And then finally, you know, texting for migrant justice. Do you want to elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, so one of the biggest things about the Migrant Justice platform is it's a platform that allows to talk about not just about, you know, just what's happening in detention, but we have a huge hashtag that's called Freedom All, which is, you know, asking ICE to release all immigrants at risk of coronavirus. So a lot of us have the privilege being in this room about, you know, having to talk about we're able to quarantine in our home, you know, Marisol, La Doña, Alex, Pepe, and also we're able to literally be at home with our kids or with our families. Many people are not able to do that. So making sure that we're signing up around this petition, and you're going on to sign about asking folks to literally release all immigrants, not one, but all immigrants who are at risk not of coronavirus, but just being in detention centers.
Lovely. Well, our Conciencia talk has come to a close. I want to thank each and every one of you for all your input, your passion and just for chiming in on such a valuable topic that I think still needs to be discussed over and over again. It can't be the last time we talk about it. We need to discuss these things at home with our parents, our grandparents, our children, and everyone else, because it's important that we support not only the Latino community, not only the immigrant community, but the Black and Brown communities that are continuously impacted and are feeling the impact within the country. So thank you all so much for joining me tonight. And now I just want to thank you all as well for being part of the conversation, for tuning in, for commenting. And I also want to remind you to mark your calendars for September 18th, when we will have the Voto Latino to kick off Hispanic Heritage Month. And that is all for today. Our talks are now bi-weekly, like I said, so just stay tuned for everything else via this channel. Thank you.